You can catch up with life on and off the pitch in the first 4 series of Playing the Field, available on video.
The best undercover cops are opportunists.
We're doing covert stuff on a big murder inquiry.
We're in.
Harry's in danger!
You've just about broken every rule in the book.
Playing the odds.
Just stay out of my face, all right?
Have to get out of there.
We all make mistakes.
Enough!
Tempting fate.
We've got a security breach.
Getting interesting now, isn't it?
Stephen Tompkinson and Nick Berry are in deep.
This is the last warning!
New crime doubles tomorrow and continuing Tuesday at 9 on BBC1.
24 hours a day.
50 people are thought to have died when a petrol station exploded.
As it breaks.
Downing Street has described the conduct of the exam board as unacceptable.
Whenever it breaks.
Tyson deciding the need for a referee was superfluous.
BBC News 24, the digital TV channel for breaking news.
This is BBC One. Now the news and sport with Darren Jordan and Rob Bonnet.
The family of one of the British al-Qaeda suspects speak of their shock and horror. His brothers claim they've been to hell and back and say they want him home. A new menace faces Israel. The first woman suicide bomber attacks Jerusalem. And tempers flare at Highbury as Arsenal dump Liverpool out of the FA Cup. Good evening. The family of one of 2 British Muslims named today as terrorist suspects held at Camp X-Ray in Cuba have been speaking tonight of their shock and bewilderment at the news of his detention. In the past hour, the brothers of Shafiq Rasool spoke outside the family house in Tipton in the West Midlands. They said they'd been to hell and back after hearing the news. They insisted their brother was not an al-Qaeda terrorist and that he'd condemned the September the 11th attacks on America. Earlier, the Foreign Office said another Briton, Asif Iqbal, again from Tipton, was also being held at Camp X-Ray.
This unremarkable family home in Tipton is where Shafiq Rasool's journey to Guantanamo Bay began. Rasool grew up here near his friend and fellow prisoner Asif Iqbal, who lived round the corner. Tonight, Shafiq Rasool's 3 brothers said they'd learned of his fate with shock and disbelief. Shafiq had watched the September the 11th attacks, they said, at home on television, and he'd been appalled. He'd gone to Pakistan in October to study. The family said they were distraught and mystified.
It was not radical in any way, shape or form. He had nothing to do, nothing against Americans or anybody like that. It was very, very westernised.
We condemned the September the 11th, the bombings of the Twin Towers, we condemned them.
Me and Shafiq sat down and watched the news on September the 11th together, and he is in total condemnation of what happened. It was not only Americans there was people representing all the world.
We want him to be brought back to this country as soon as possible.
That's what the British government wants too. The Foreign Secretary Jack Straw says the British accused, held here at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, should stand trial in a British court. Today, the US Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld went to Cuba to visit the makeshift jail. He praised the detention conditions there. But the status of these men is disputed even within the Bush War Cabinet. Mr. Rumsfeld's own colleague, Secretary of State Colin Powell, wants them declared prisoners of war under the Geneva Convention. Mr. Rumsfeld said that was out of the question. The Americans are not likely to make special provision for the British prisoners. The Americans want answers from these men about the terror network, and the intended interrogations have barely begun. Alan Little, BBC News.
Well, as we've heard, Shafiq Rasool and Asif Iqbal both grew up in Tipton in the West Midlands. The community there is surprised and bewildered tonight at how 2 local youngsters, known more for their love of football than politics, could have got involved in the al-Qaeda network. Emma Howard has spent the day in Tipton and sent this report.
The long-standing settled Muslim community of Tipton is in shock tonight after learning the news that 2 young men known to many here are in custody in Cuba. 24-year-old Shafiq Rasool left 6 months ago for Pakistan, a holiday with his family. Only they came back, and the young law student, many described as more interested in football than religion, flew on to Afghanistan.
He can't even hold the rifle, never mind fighting. He never seen the rifle. He's a law student in Birmingham.
This is the secondary school where both Shafiq Rasool and Asif Iqbal, the other young man caught by the Americans, spent most of their childhood. Asif Iqbal had in the last year shown more of an interest in Islam, but community leaders deny there were any groups in the area looking to recruit young men to fight in a war against America.
This area has no organised militancy whatsoever. It's a very moderate area. You could say that they've just been misled rather than they've been organised and in Tipton and they've been working from Tipton and gone from here. It's nothing like that.
The community, shocked at the capture of these two young men, are concerned at the treatment they may be receiving in Cuba. The feeling here is if there are any charges to be faced, they should be brought back to Britain to face them. Emma Howard, BBC News, Tipton.
French police have arrested a group of Romanians suspected of helping illegal immigrants to enter Britain through the Channel Tunnel. They're believed to have tampered with signals so that the train stopped, allowing people to scramble on board. It's not known how many people have entered Britain this way, but the French rail authorities say it's been happening for several months. Well, let's talk to our Paris correspondent now, John Sopel, who's outside the Sangatte refugee camp near the tunnel entrance. John, this is an extraordinary discovery. How did they do it?
Yeah, what has happened here is that they've, in the past we've used to the tales of desperation of people trying to secrete themselves on board a train, even jumping on board a train. Never before has there been the sophistication of an operation where the smugglers have been able to stop a train by having a key to the signal box, unlocking the lock, and then being able to rewire the signal box so that they can change a green light to red. And it happened so frequently that the train drivers became suspicious about why in the middle of the night their freight trains were being stopped. They alerted their bosses, the bosses alerted the police mounted a week-long surveillance operation along a 40-kilometre track, and they caught people on Friday night stopping a train trying to smuggle illegal immigrants so that they could get to Britain.
And John, are the authorities there giving any details as to how they plan to stop this in the future?
Well, no, it presents a real security headache for them because for the past few months the concentration has been around the tunnel entrance and the ferry port. Now we have seen the smugglers moving out, trying to find new weaknesses. There is a 40 kilometres of track, 25 miles where they can operate, and they have been operating for months, stopping different signals along the line, and now the police and the authorities are going to have to review their security arrangements and clamp down even further.
OK, John, thank you. A Palestinian woman is believed to have carried out a suicide bombing in Israel, which killed one other person and injured more than 50. She's the first female suicide bomber in 50 years of conflict. The blast in Jerusalem's main shopping street, Jaffa Road, this morning was the third attack on a city centre this week.
In downtown Jerusalem, devastation once again. The wounded helped away after another deadly attack, this tiny baby lucky to survive. For some, the shock was too much. Another horrendous suicide bombing, one more in a series, but today was different. This time, the death and destruction were caused by a woman. A bystander noticed the woman as she made her way to this spot. He said she looked strange, like she didn't belong. Israeli police sources say in recent days they had received information that a female suicide bomber might be on her way, a grim new milestone in this conflict. So for Israel, new victims and a new kind of enemy. No firm information yet on the bomber, but one report claims she was a young student from the West Bank. Just hours before, Palestinian women marching to Yasser Arafat's besieged headquarters, showing solidarity. That's as far as women here usually go. But Palestinians say it's a sign of the times, of their desperation and despair, that the first woman has blown herself up. Orla Gearan, BBC News, Jerusalem.
The rail company South West Trains says it will use managers to replace staff who take part in strike action. Local stations across the network have already been closed ahead of the strike, which begins at midnight. It's the third action in as many weeks, but today the company upped the ante, warning it would train enough non-union staff to make a strike irrelevant. Well, our business editor, Jeff Randall, is at London's Waterloo Station. So, Jeff, what's the latest now? Is there any hope of a last-minute settlement?
Good evening, Darren. Well, I'm afraid it doesn't look good for commuters. Just before we came on air, I spoke to both sides, that's the unions and the management, and I'm afraid to say they are as entrenched as ever, completely apart. Now, if you look behind me here, you can see a fairly empty Waterloo station as it closes for business tonight, and I suspect tomorrow morning during rush hour it will look pretty much the same way. That said, I have here in my hand a temporary timetable put out by South West Trains to cover tomorrow's strike day and on Tuesday. And what they're saying is they hope to get between 1/4 and 1/3 of their trains out. Now, I don't know whether they can pull that off or not, but even if they do, it looks like being another day of rail misery for commuters in the South West region.
So, Jeff, it seems that the rail company is preparing to take a hard line then with the union.
You're definitely right, Darren. The company is really playing hardball on this. It's up the stakes. What it's saying to the union is quite simply this: our trains are going to run tomorrow. The only question is whether your members will be on board. And that's absolutely typical of Brian Souter, the chairman of the company that owns South West. He's known as a tough operator, a hard-nosed operator. He doesn't take no for an answer. And tomorrow, he won't relish the strike, but he won't shirk it either.
Jeff, thank you for that. The new high-tech air traffic control centre at Swanwick in Hampshire finally went live early today after a delay of nearly 6 years. The complex changeover appears to have gone smoothly. The centre, which costs £623 million, is expected to handle 2 million flights this year. A fire at an army munitions dump in Nigeria has caused dozens of huge explosions in the commercial capital Lagos. The explosion shook buildings and shattered windows in the centre of the city. It's believed that the fire started in a street market, then spread to the munitions dump. A special ceremony has taken place in Manchester to commemorate National Holocaust Day. Political leaders joined survivors to remember the millions of people who died in Nazi death camps. Kevin Bouquet reports.
The Home Secretary was among 1,000 invited guests who came to Manchester to commemorate National Holocaust Day. Manchester's Jewish community includes a small number of Holocaust survivors. As a young boy, Meyer Bomstick spent 3 years in the concentration camps. Most of his family were murdered, but he survived.
Since I've retired, I remember more about the Holocaust than I did 20, 30 years ago. Everything starts coming back. And it's more coming back now.
The UK commemorated Holocaust Day for the first time last year in response to a long campaign by British Jews. Also remembered at tonight's service were other victims of Nazism, including gypsies, homosexuals and disabled people.
Tonight doesn't only function as a museum piece, it also serves as an attempt to raise awareness about the issues of refugees, about basic humanity and basic human rights.
Tonight's commemoration ended with a statement of commitment affirming society's continuing responsibility to fight the evils of racism and discrimination, to apply to the present the lessons of the past. Kevin Bouquet, BBC News, Manchester.
Now, with news of how the holders Liverpool were knocked out of the FA Cup and all the rest of the day's sport, here's Rob Bonnet. Rob.
Dan, thanks. Good evening. Arsenal have their revenge for defeat in last year's FA Cup final, beating Liverpool 1-0 at Highbury with a goal from Dennis Bergkamp, who was later sent off. So was his teammate Martin Keown, and also Liverpool's Jamie Carragher for throwing a coin back into the crowd on a day of dramatic action.
A game which started in drizzle and would end in a disciplinary storm. Not even the soggy conditions, though, could dampen Arsenal's crisp passing. Henry's precision and Bergkamp's power heading the Gunners to a deserved half-time advantage. What had been a sparky encounter then ignited in spectacular fashion. Martin Keown's manhandling of Michael Owen earning him a red card. That, though, proved pretty tame compared to what followed. Bergkamp's ugly lunge on Carragher receiving equally short shrift from referee Mike Riley. And when Carragher then threw a missile back into the crowd, for which he later made a public apology, 3 players had departed within 5 frantic minutes. A football match did eventually resume, Owen almost claiming a late equaliser, but Arsenal clung on, their ability undoubted, but their discipline again very much in question. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
Well, perhaps the goal of the day was El Berkovic's breathtaking volley to put First Division Manchester City ahead against Premiership Ipswich. Kevin Keegan's side went on to dominate the match, winning 4-1. Another upset at 3rd Division Cheltenham, who beat 1st Division Burnley 2-1. Russell Milton's free kick was followed by a second goal from Julian Alsop. Cheltenham are in the 5th round for the first time in their history. And more drama at Peterborough, where the 2nd Division side stunned Premiership Newcastle with this spectacular goal from David Farrell to level the score at 2-2. However, a penalty from Alan Shearer after a debatable handball re-established Newcastle's lead, and they eventually won 4-2. There were 5 FA Cup ties altogether today. The one result outstanding is from the all-2nd Division match. It finished Tranmere 3, Cardiff 1. This evening's 5th round draw has been kind to the Premiership clubs, most of whom have benefited from home ties. Amongst them Newcastle, who play Manchester City and welcome back their former manager Kevin Keegan. Only Blackburn at Middlesbrough and Fulham at Walsall are away. Leicester beat Leinster 29-18 and Llanelli beat Bath 27-10 to reach the semi-finals of Rugby Union's Heineken Cup. Llanelli's win came thanks to a powerful display from their forwards and the accuracy of Stephen Jones' boot. The fly half scored all their points. And finally, Sweden's Thomas Johansson is the Australian Open tennis champion after beating Marat Safin in a 4-set final. That's it, Darren.
Thanks, Rob. Let's get the latest on the weather now. Rob McKelwey is here. Rob, and I understand it's going to be a rainy and windy day everywhere, but particularly in Scotland.
You're spot on, because so far this weekend we had the strongest winds and the wettest weather in southern Britain, England. But now, yes, it does transfer to Scotland. In fact, once more, the brewing area is the Atlantic, that huge area of potentially violent weather, and this is going to be actually violent weather. There's fairly good confidence on this developing storm now. The curl is coming in here. This low of about 950 millibars isn't a record, but isn't half deep, and it's going to swing straight across Scotland. You can see the isobars tightening all the time in the next 24 hours. So we are all going to see strong winds, and there will be gusts, I think, of at least 60 miles an hour for most. But the concentration is going to be most likely through central Scotland. As you see, it's gone in 24 hours' time, but it's this next 24 hours that we need to concentrate on. There's a huge swathe of Britain where there's a very high risk of disruption from these strong winds, but I'd like to focus, I think, more particularly in lowland Scotland. You can imagine the high winds being funneled by the Highlands, the southern uplands, across Glasgow, across to Edinburgh, and across Deeside and Tayside as well. The gusts of 90 miles an hour or so could happen anywhere, but this is, I think, the area most at risk, because, of course, this is potentially damaging stuff. Now, it doesn't last forever. It will go through in 24 hours, and with it there's bound to be rain, horizontal rain, and blustery showers, I suspect, as well, in England and Wales. By the time we get to the end of the day, we're looking, I think, briefly for a cold snap and a bit of snow to come through. But it is the winds, of course, that are going to be worst of all. I say it doesn't last forever. Tuesday brings us back into the normal flow of things, windy, mild, and at times wet. That's Tuesday's chart. So 24 hours then, the next 24 hours is the real thing to watch. I think severe gales by the time we even get into the morning across a large part of Scotland. This is a sustained wind of 50 or 60 miles an hour, with those gusts in excess of 80 for Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland and northern England, the concentration through the central lowlands of Scotland.
Rob, thank you very much. Now, before we go, a reminder of the main news again tonight. The family of Shafiq Rasul, one of 2 British Muslims named today as being held at Camp X-Ray in Cuba, have been speaking of their shock and bewilderment at the news of his detention. They insist he's not an Al-Qaeda terrorist, and they say they want him home. Well, that's it from us. Don't forget there are regular news bulletins throughout the night on BBC News 24. But from Rob and from me, good night.
This is the doctor who questioned the safety of MMR.
When the parents said to us, I think this started after the MMR vaccine, we were obliged to investigate that.
The government is convinced he's wrong.
The vaccine is safe. There are no grounds for suspecting that MMR vaccine causes autism.
The facts and fears surrounding MMR.
We're talking about kids' lives here.
Panorama, exposing the truth. Next Sunday at 10:15 on BBC1.
Slightly later than planned now on BBC1. This is what happens when you don't play their game. Some strong language as Sylvester Stallone and Robert De Niro star in the movie premiere, Copland.